Well, hello, everybody. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
And welcome to the Back Catalog Listening Party. My name is Mother Banjo, one of your hosts.
My name is Anthony Ihrig, the other host.
And today we have joining us from the band Brass Lassie, Laura McKenzie and Patrice Pockish. Welcome to the show. And folks are excited. Connie, right on time, right at 4 o'clock.
Hey,
hello from Richfield. And Alan wishing us a happy new year from Texas. And let's see, Chris having an Uda Pills. Ooh, that sounds good.
Nice.
And
shovel fatigue.
Okay,
I'm with you, man.
Anyone who lives in this area, as we all do in Minnesota, knows it's been a week. Let's just say that. Lots and lots of snow, very unrelenting. And I just got a massage today because last night I was doing so good with the shoveling, lifting with my legs. I felt great all week until last night. The last 10 minutes of 1 inch snow I was shoveling did me in. So
oh no, I'm sorry.
I feel your pain, Chris, and I'm glad you're enjoying a beer with us today. Joe, will be a fun show today. So Joe's not joking. Gary, hi, and another Gary joining us. And we are excited to have you and the chickens. And Lynn joining us from South Carolina. Psyched about the show.
Warm glog.
Warm glog. Well, what are you drinking, Tony? Are you having warm glog where you are?
I'm having warm red wine out of a box. I just finished shoveling for the 6th time, and the plow came and just undid everything I just had done. So
it's the worst.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just kind of enjoy this hour, anyways.
Exactly.
How about you?
In honor of our Laura, our Scottish guest, I'm having some scotch, some open.
Ooh, all right.
So sláinte to you. And Laura, what are you enjoying a beverage on this Friday?
I'm embarrassed to say it's champagne.
Ooh, no,
it's
embarrassed about.
It's our first show of the new year.
Yeah, happy New Year.
First show of the new year, exactly. So
exactly.
Awesome.
Well, cheers to that. And Patrice, are you enjoying anything?
I'm so sorry. I wasn't prepared for this tone of show.
That's okay. There is no wrong answer to are you enjoying a beverage, because we're going to enjoy lots of great music and conversation together. And if you ever decide you want to slip out and get something, we won't be offended. We won't take it personally. But if you are new to the Back Catalog Listening Party, this is what we do every Friday. We get together, maybe have a drink, and invite some of our favorite guest musicians on to revisit an old record, and it's really a conversation. So if tell us where you're tuned in from, if you're enjoying something on this Friday, what the weather's like where you are, whether you had to shovel 6 feet of snow or whatever it was. And
Alan says, I don't miss the snow. I have to confess, sending thoughts and prayers.
That's right, from
Thanks,
Texas.
Alan.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Well, we are excited to take a break from all that shoveling and to enjoy an hour of music with Laura and Patrice from the band Brass Lassie. And even if you don't know the band Brass Lassie, chances are, especially if you live in the Minnesota area and you've enjoyed any form of Celtic or other kinds of traditional music, I'm betting you've probably seen one or both of these women perform before because they've played in lots of other bands. But maybe we could start off with each of you telling a little bit about where you grew up, how you fell into playing the instruments you play, and how you found each other for Brass Lassie.
Hmm. Oh, Patrice has the best story for growing up, I think. Yeah.
No,
Growing growing up with dance music. Yeah.
oh, your Christmas story of the first bagpipes, I think, beats it all.
Well, we have time for both. So, Patrice, do you want to
Yeah.
get us started?
Oh, well, I grew up in a Slovenian family in central Wisconsin, and my dad played accordion, and my brothers played, and I actually made some money during college playing bass guitar and banjo, and yes, banjo.
All right.
Nice.
Bonus
And
points.
yeah, okay, all right. It's just chords, with
All you
a
need.
polka
That counts.
band and Richie Yurkovich actually in central Wisconsin and with my dad and stuff. And but I also played oboe and classically trained. Went to Eau Claire and University of Illinois and Champaign-Urbana, and moved up to Minneapolis in '81. Somehow fell into first English country dance music with some friends, and then that led to some contra dance music, which then I think is how I finally connected with Laura, if I recall. I don't even remember how that happened. Do you?
I don't. It was probably, I didn't do much contra dance. I would just be maybe a sub for a contra dance band, and I always enjoyed that. But it was very, very different from the Irish Cayley band music that I was honed on as far as dance bands. But it must have been at a contra dance where we met. And Patrice's piano playing behind dance music is absolutely irresistible. So I knew we had to do some projects together, and we've done a few.
Yeah. So tell us a little, just briefly, what other bands you were in before Brass Lassie.
Well, we had a trio back in the late 90s, believe it or not, that included Mag McDermott here from Minneapolis on fiddle called Macha Tree. And it was a pan-Celtic trio, and it was just the three of us, and we had so much fun making up crazy, I think, unusual arrangements of traditional music. I remember those rehearsals were full of laughter. Now, that doesn't always happen in band rehearsals, but every rehearsal we had was full of laughter. But anyway, we made a recording back then, and ever since then, I've kept trying to do whatever I can with Patrice. And when I had the idea for Brass Lassie, I knew it couldn't happen without Patrice as a member.
Excellent. Well, Laura, tell us a little bit about your background and the various instruments that you have come to play.
Well, my background, unfortunately, I didn't start playing traditional music as a youth. I was classically trained, but in college, I was studying ethnomusicology, and suddenly I became, as my graduate advisor said, when I was doing a master's degree, you've become unplugged. Now, this was before unplugged meant what it means now, but she was absolutely right. I had started playing it rather than studying it, and I realized that was the way to go. So I turned completely to traditional music just when I finished college.
And when you were studying classical music, what was there a particular instrument that you were studying at that time?
Well, I was studying flute and voice.
Excellent. Yeah. And now you play all kinds of flutes, whistles, pipes of various kinds, which I'm sure we'll get to dig into a little bit.
Yeah, something snapped some year after I'd been into Irish music for a while, playing flutes and whistles and concertina. Something really snapped, and all these different bagpipes started flowing into my life.
This sounds like the stuff of some kind of joke. As a banjo player, I feel like your pain because bagpipes and
Well,
banjos.
she
Share
is
that
tuning in
common.
from St. Paul, though, where I got to say, when I grew up, every now and again you could hear the pipes coming up from McAllister College, waking me up at the crack of dawn. So it's you're coming from St. Paul now, right, Laura?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Laura, as I mentioned, Mackenzie, a good Scottish name. Was there any sort of bagpipes in your family at all, even if you didn't grow up playing it?
There was nothing in my family about about our heritage. Really, there wasn't. There really wasn't until. Well, there just simply wasn't. Except Patrice's story, though. My father was a very humble, sweet, quiet man, and he was really supported my classical music studies. But he was a kid. As a kid, he had taken some violin lessons, and he ran over his violin with his bicycle once. So that's how he felt about playing music himself. But
Oh.
when I was in high school, one Christmas, he put an envelope on the tree for me, and it was a bit of money. And it was at the time, I won't tell you what it was, but it was a lot at the time. It doesn't sound like much now, but it was a Christmas present. And there was a little note in it saying, for bagpipes. Now, we'd never talked about bagpipes. We'd never really talked about our Scottish heritage. I hadn't expressed interest in traditional music or other instruments, but I accepted it graciously, and we never talked about it. And after he passed away is when something snapped, and I started just going into bagpipes deeply, and now I play quite a few different European pipes. So anyway, he planted the seed.
Oh,
I love that story. It's like clairvoyant,
Well, we are so excited to have you both here. And again, as you said, you've teamed up on various projects, but this one, Brass Lassie, tell us a little bit about Laura. It sounded like this was your brainchild.
Yes, it was. It was something that I thought about for quite a few years. And my first inspiration was hearing La Boutine Souriante, the Québécois, the French-Canadian band who played traditional music for years. And then in their later iterations started adding a horn section. And when I heard that, I thought, that's it. That's it. But I wasn't doing any French-Canadian music, so I imagined applying that to traditional Irish and Scottish and some other Celtic traditions. And it was when the name Brass Lassie came to me. The name came to me, and that was the moment that I actually started working on it and collecting people and getting ideas of people to work with for arranging.
Wonderful.
Really cool.
Well, I think the best way to get a sense of what this band does is to dive into some music, and then we can chat more about the makeup of the band and whatnot. So this first track, Ann Lacey's and Tabank Shenanigans. Is there anything you want to say about this medley of tunes before we take a listen?
No, let's just listen.
We're going to let the music do the talking. This is Brass Lassie here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
Ha!
Yeah,
That is how you start off a Friday, right
that's
there.
right.
Well, earlier we were joking about our dance moves, and that you don't really want to see mine or Tony's dance moves, but I'm afraid you were subject to a few of them already because I couldn't
At least
stop
the head
bopping.
bobbing,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Um, so Brass Lassie here on the back catalog listening party, the first track from their self-titled album. And Joe putting in a nice endorsement for Brass Lassie. You really want to see Brass Lassie live, not just a concert, but a real celebration. And
You can
you
feel it.
know, you can. And I would love to know, I mean, so much of, obviously there's a great dancing tradition and both of you have played a lot of dances, whether it's a Cayley dance or a contra dance or, other folk dances. Your music is so danceable. What kind of dance do people do to this music? Are they, or are they just moving?
Well, when we've done some outdoor shows, then we get a lot of beautiful freeform dancing, which is the greatest.
Yep.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of people echo our friend Christopher's comment here, where it was like, wasn't expecting that. Like, it's such an interesting combination of sounds, and yet it works so well together. And I imagine that is kind of something that comes up from a booking perspective, from a publicity, you know what I mean? Like, oftentimes it's when you're in a traditional music, you say, well, we do this or we do that. How do you, like, do you have like an elevator pitch for this band?
An elevator pitch. Wow, I need to talk to my agent about that. I don't know.
Well, you pay someone else to give the elevator pitch. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
how would you like when because a lot of this, this idea that you had, you heard the name, you got the name and you had this vision. Is there a way that you describe it to people if you had to just kind of sum it up?
Well, there is, and I think I need to change that because I'm not very successful in booking this band, which I think should be world famous.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But I tend to want to, initially, I emphasized the fact that it's traditional music that's preserved. It's not a fusion band. We don't alter the traditional music. We don't alter it rhythmically or atmospherically. It's the reels and the jigs pretty straight on. Everything else is there to kind of enhance it and make it unique, backing it up. But we don't dissect the traditional music. And that's a bit too academic, I think.
No, I think that's a real differentiator, actually.
Yeah.
That you're trying to stay true to the tunes,
Yeah.
but adding
But
these other arrangements.
Yeah, and what you're really doing is just adding more instruments, it sounds like, more than changing the tunes. So so tell us a little bit about the instrumentation. Obviously we have Laura, you play I don't on that tune it sounded like you were maybe playing flute or whistle on that, but and then Patrice on piano. And obviously there's horns, but tell us a little bit about how many people are in this band. I realize that maybe not every gig has all of them, but because there's a lot of you there.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Is that right? Did I
Well,
count right?
it was originally a 10-piece band. Right now we're a 9-piece band, but we have a couple of dancers that work with us regularly, so I consider us an 11-piece band.
Nice.
But so the horn section was of my personal choice, the instrumentation. I love trombones. And so it's a tenor trombone and a bass trombone.
Nice.
And a French horn because I love French horn. And the French hornist is someone that I worked with in a big road show for many years. So I knew what she could do on the French horn. And then we have a trumpet player as well.
Nice. And what other instruments do you have in addition to the horns happening there?
We have fiddle, which is Mary Vanurny. That extraordinary fiddle feature on that first track there is Mary Vanurny here from the Twin Cities. And then we have Mark Anderson on that recording and still with the band on percussion and Enrique Toussaint on electric bass.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, if you just tuned in, we're chatting with Laura and Patrice from the band Brass Lassie. And looks like we have Joseph just joined. And if you just joined the party, make sure to say hi to us and let us know where you're tuned in from. If you're enjoying, if you have any questions for Laura and Patrice as we go through the show today. This show is all about revisiting old records and talking about them and answering your questions. And one question I have, which I've always wondered about not playing any, traditional Celtic music. And there's other kinds of, certainly you hear this in old timey music too, where there's medleys of tunes. Um, and so I've been an aficionado for a long time, but not a player in that tradition. And I'd love to know, when you're doing a set of tunes like this, I realize sometimes tunes naturally sit together and are played together, and you might learn them that way. But, sometimes you're like, oh, let's do this tune and this tune. How do you work at making that transition? Like with these tunes in particular, there's obviously all of a sudden there's sort of a break, and then you go into this different tune. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Oh, that's a good question. And Patrice might be able to speak to this too, because she's in her contradance playing has done medley after medley after medley. Well, it's kind of hard to describe, but certain tunes just seem to have an affinity for each other. And I think that I actually learned that. Now, those two tunes that you just heard were reels written in the form of traditional reels, but they were written fairly recently, so they have a little bit more of a modern sound. But playing in an Irish céilí band is where I really learned how to put tunes together. I know there are some céilí bands that just have like a big list of tunes, jigs, reels, and what they do is they just go through the list. And then they wonder why the dance floor is dead and why people are exhausted and tired and why they're not having fun. Because you have to put them together in a way that uplifts your listeners or your dancers. So the next thing you go into has to have something that makes everyone go, oh, like that. So, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. Sometimes it's a change of key, but you can do it with tunes that are all medleyed in the same key too. So you don't need any cheesy key change to do that. It's just something about the shape of the melody that tells you.
You get a feel for it, like a story, right? Like it
Yeah.
the songs enhance each other.
Yeah. Patrice, what do you think?
I've never been good at putting the tunes together, like figuring out which tune goes together. But I do like the cheesy transitions. That's my specialty.
You like the key changes?
Yeah.
I hope it wasn't cheesy, but we have had a lot of fun with in Contratopia, contradance band I play in. A lot of wonderful moments of, especially John Gooden, who is not with us anymore. But we would come at it from a theoretical, a little bit of a classical approach, I guess. Go, well, okay, that tone's going to be there, and you need to get there, and how do you get to it? So that's how we'd come up with some of those.
Yeah, it's kind of like a nice little puzzle. Like, how do I get from point A to point B with it working?
Yeah.
Especially with 10 musicians, that's a lot of different instruments to think about in terms of making that transition.
And those chromatics, just, I'm sorry, they don't work well on banjo. So, as much as we'd like you in it.
Well, and I think it's interesting, Laura, that you were thinking about the live show. You were thinking about dancers, so I think that in some ways answers the question on a different level too. Some people are thinking of it more as maybe a recorded piece, but this is clearly a live band.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Chris asked, did the band rehearse together in someone's living room? Yeah, it has to be a big living room with that many instruments, so that the trombone isn't knocking somebody out while you're playing.
Yeah, right.
But how, especially during these last couple of years, because I know you started in, I guess this record came out in 2018, I think. So you were kind of just getting going, and then the pandemic hit. But when you rehearse, where do you rehearse? Do you have a rehearsal space or?
Well, that's a good question. We used to sometimes rent some space over at the Celtic Junction Arts Center, but that space isn't available anymore. But that was hard too, because they were dance studios and they had mirrors on the wall. And that means a lot of bouncing of sound with the brass. So the best places I think that we rehearsed were in my basement here in St. Paul. However, that basement has become a micro sanctuary for foster rescue chickens. So
wow,
foster
rescue chickens.
A little bit pressed. The band did rehearse over here one afternoon, and I put the chickens way up, kind of in the garret of the house, and gave them lots of treats. So they were okay with that. But
Amazing.
yeah, I have to move them to another part of the house if we're going to rehearse here.
It's so funny. We've had other wildlife appear on the back catalog listening party, cats and dogs, making an appearance. And I love Chicken Lounge. I love the idea, though, that this is like a new problem that a band would have. Is like, well, what do we do with the chickens? Usually it's kids or dogs, but
It's maybe not as uncommon in the bluegrass world, but,
yeah,
but
exactly. Exactly. Well, if anyone's tuned in from the Twin Cities area and has a lead on a good practice space for Brass Lassie with not too many reflective surfaces,
or farm animals.
or farm animals, throw it in the comments, and maybe we can help Brass Lassie out. Well, this is so fun. I can't wait to dig into more tunes from this record because it's so good. And here's another example of a medley of tunes. What kind of tunes are these? So the last one we heard was reels, and maybe you could also tell folks like what distinguishes like a reel from a jig, because not everyone is. If you're not a dancer, you might not know that.
Yeah. Well, basically, those reels were in 4/4 time. So they're kind of counted in twos. And this next set is a set of jigs. That being said, however, the first one is indeed a jig that I made up for my son, Dugan Mackenzie McGraw, but we open it playing the jig very, very slow before we play it like a jig. So it's a duet with myself and Enrique Toussaint at the beginning. But the other two, the Blue Crowbar and the Return Home, are definitely 6/8 jigs. So you can dance your jig steps however you feel them to that music. And the Blue Crowbar was written, I think, maybe even at a Macha Tree rehearsal with Mag McDermott. Mag McDermott put that tune together. And I'm not sure why she called it the Blue Crowbar.
It's been a mystery ever since.
Yeah.
If anyone
just
knows,
to add-
throw it in the comments.
Yeah, right.
and just to get beyond the numbers, a reel is deedle 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 deedle, and a jig is leedly 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 leedly.
Or a reel is watermelon, 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 and a jig is jiggity, 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 jiggity.
Ah.
All
Or
right.
chickadee, 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 chick.
Chickadee,
If with the chickens.
I feel like I'm
Yep.
learning some stuff here. This is great. Well, if you got your dancing shoes, you can dance a jig to this next set of tunes. Dugan Mackenzie's The Blue Crowbar, The Return Home. This is Brass Lassie here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
I would just wanted to pause just in case it decided to go into another jig right there. But Brass Lassie here on the back catalog listening party
So fun.
with Duke and Mackenzie's The Blue Crowbar and The Return Home. A wonderful medley here on the show. And Laura and Patrice joining us from the band. And two of the 9 or 10 people, or 11 if you count the dancers. And speaking of which, I am I right in thinking that the dancers are percussive dancers? Is that right?
Mhm.
So when you're doing some of these tunes live and you have the dancer, does that take some of the pressure off Mark Anderson or not? Because I know Mark is a magician and he can do all kinds of things at the same time, not just pat his head and rub his stomach, but play all kinds of cool percussion. But yeah, how does that weave into the sonics of the band?
Well, I think it just sort of enhances and it just adds another exciting element, the sound of their feet. It certainly doesn't relieve Mark though. It just adds to it. And actually, Joe Twala and Carla Grotting from the Flying Foot Forum, they're percussive dancers, but they're also theatrical dancers. So they're not always making noise. Sometimes they're just moving around in beautiful patterns as well.
Nice.
Nice. For those just listening, we have a picture here on the screen of a more recent photo of the band, and it looks like the dancers right up there in front, and I can see that theatrical stance there. Even must add a lot to the live performance.
It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
And I would imagine this must also determine a lot of the places in which you're able to perform, because if you have a 10-piece band plus one or two dancers, you need a lot of space on the stage. You can't fit into a little bar stage doing what you're doing. No, not a little Irish pub for that.
Not really, no. I've learned how to rent extra risers.
But they have to be very sturdy risers for dancers, for sure.
Yeah.
Good
Well-
observation. Very good observation. What's the place on Nicollet that we played? It's like Mark's cymbal was right about here.
Oh, the ice house.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That was the tightest. That was the
I bet.
tightest. Believe it or not.
Great sounding room, but I could see that being pretty small.
Challenging.
Well, speaking of seeing this band live, as Joe said, it's a celebration, and Laura has an email list at lauramackenzie.com where she will send you when and where they are playing. I highly recommend you hopping on that list, whether you're in the upper Midwest like we are or wherever you are. Hop on, because you're going to learn a lot about what she's up to, what she's doing. And you also have CDs for sale. Is that correct?
yes. Lots.
So, and you have there's Brass Lassie has their own website. It's brasslassie.com, where you can purchase the CD, and there's some physical CDs left in stock at brasslassie.com.
And she was just saying that she has lots, and I have a feeling the way she said that she might want to relieve some of that space for either rehearsals or for the chickens. So help Laura out by unloading some of those CDs from her house, and she'll send those to you, maybe even with a signature or something like that. So definitely you want to hear this album in its full glory, because this sounds really great, and we haven't asked yet where you recorded this album.
At the most wonderful place, Creation Audio in Minneapolis.
Oh, right across the street from the Ice House, right?
Is it right across from the Ice House?
It's right next door, right?
Yes, a historic, famous studio, and it's still going strong, and it was just absolutely the perfect place for us to be.
And did you record these songs live? I would imagine, again, you have such a live component to your band, and with so many intricacies of your music, were you able to track it all live together, or did you kind of have to layer stuff on?
We did have to layer, yeah, we did, because there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in these tracks. There is my co-producer there, with his hands out. That's Pete Johnson, who was the ideal person to bring in and co-produce this record, because he knows I haven't told you who all the horn players are, but he absolutely understands horn arrangements, and I couldn't have done it without him. And there's Steve Weiss of Creation Audio there at the board.
Very nice.
And there is our original Brass Lassie horns. Trisha on the French horn is still with us, but then we have Kate DeVoe on trumpet and Lauren Husting on trombone and Brooklyn Audette on bass trombone. And what they are ringing there are our Brass Lassie bells. We have our own little mini cowbells, and you can also get them on the Brass Lassie website.
You have cowbells for sale? Oh my goodness.
I want a Brass Lassie cowbell. Then everyone will know when I'm coming. They'll be warned.
Yeah.
I love that.
And there's our melody players. There's myself and Danielle Enblum on fiddle. She was also our step dancer then, and Mary Vanurni on fiddle.
Excellent.
And myself with our co-producer Pete Johnson and our rhythm section, Enrique there next to me, Enrique Toussaint. How lucky are we to have Enrique Toussaint? He's usually touring the world with Paul Anka Band, but we get him when we can for concerts. And Mark Anderson on percussion again, absolutely brilliant. And
all stars.
And our brilliant Patrice Pakish.
And for those of you who are just listening, we're seeing images here from the studio as she introduces everybody, and you can really get a sense of the space that they were in. And it is just a wonderful sounding room. And I'll second what Ellen said earlier about getting the high resolution version of this on CD if you can, and maybe get a cowbell while you're at it.
Exactly.
I was trying to find my cowbell. That's why I'm sorry it ran out. I don't know where it went to.
And I love that. And I love that Alan said more cowbell with OOR, bringing in some of that. They're very clever. And if you want to see any of these photos and images that we're sharing on the YouTube version of the show, you can always we share all of the episodes that we've done here on Back Catalog Listening Party on our website at backcataloglisteningparty.com. And in addition to the video, you'll get to we also share the images and links to all the various projects that we talk about here on the show. So you can check it out later and share with your friends. But thank you for tuning into the Back Catalog Listening Party. If you just tuned in, this is the show where we invite some of our favorite musicians on to revisit old records. This one came out in 2018, and Laura McKenzie and Patrice Pakish, who are joining us from this 10-piece band, this is not as far back catalog as we could get with them, but we are enjoying the music and very much. And if you have any comments or questions or anything like that, you can throw them in the comments, and we'd love to hear that. I see Gary said Pete was Manhattan Transfer's tour drummer. So so the co-producer of this record. So working with some top-notch talent here on the show. And I like the way, Laura, that you described the different sets of people. You're like, we have the brass section, then we have the melody players, like the fiddle and the flute. And is that how you recorded, kind of in batches? Is that how you layered the instruments?
We did, yeah. We did scratch melodies, myself and Mary Vanurni, for the rhythm section. And then we
that's not chicken scratch. Not to be confused.
Scratch. No. And then the rhythm section played with our scratch tracks, and then the horns, and then we came back and polished up our melody lines.
Excellent.
Well, along the same lines, I was listening to some of those horn lines, and you mentioned that some of those arrangements were from the co-producer. Was that you were mentioning? I was curious how these are written. Are you working it out with them, or where does this stuff come from?
We work mainly with Peter Enblum, who is now playing tenor trombone in the band. We actually have him in the band. When I started this band, I asked kind of on the phone and online and just people I knew in town, who was the best horn arranger? Who was the best horn arranger? Without qualifying what type of music. And everybody said Peter Enblum.
Wow.
So of course we went to Peter Enblum. And it turns out he's the uncle of Danielle Enblum, who was our fiddler and step dancer when we started out. And the funny thing is, Pete Johnson, my co-producer, and Peter Enblum were in some fantastic bands as teenagers here in the Twin Cities region. So they have known each other's music for a long time. So it was ideal. And Peter Enblum has done the arranging. I would work with Peter. I'd come up with music that meant something to me, or that I, imagined being in this larger context, and I'd sit down with him and I would kind of go with his response to the music. And if it was something that he didn't respond to right away, I just put that away, went to the next thing. So I found things that he really responded to, and he just made these fantastic arrangements. And we're working on new material now. So with Pete.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think we have a photo here of the latest iteration, and Pete is in this photo, that
Yep, he's right in the middle.
front and center there.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And can you talk a little bit about how the band has changed? It's at post-pandemic. It sounded like some changes in personnel.
Well, yeah, we were on hiatus for a little longer than the pandemic, and when we came back, life has changed for a lot of people. And I asked everybody, who wants to continue on, who can, depending on what's going on in their lives and projects that they're doing. And it turned out that we needed 3 new horn players. And so that's how we got Pete. Although I was working with Pete we were trying to, get new women horn players.
Mm-hmm.
But wow, that was tough. That was tough. And not because they don't exist, but they're busy. They were really
That's a
busy.
good problem to have. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm,
And finally,
mhm.
Pete said, well, I can do it. And I said, oh my gosh, we actually get to have him. And then Dave Buttimer on bass trombone is someone that I was also on the road with for many years when I played with the Lori Line Orchestra, back when it was a huge touring band. And he played in that band. So I knew Dave was great. And there he is on bass trombone there near the left end.
Excellent.
And then Beckett Schuholm is someone that was recommended to me by many different people, from St. Olaf College to classical teachers at the University of Minnesota. All kinds of people gave me Beckett's name. So we're lucky to have Beckett on trumpet.
Excellent, excellent. And like I mentioned earlier, this is a band that's out there doing it. They're playing, and you can learn more by jumping on Laura's email list at lauramckenzie.com. And I would think the dates would also be on the Brass Lassie website as well. Is that correct? Keep it up to date. Awesome.
And I can attest, as someone who's on Laura's email list, I got an email today from Laura's email list talking about her being on back catalog, and also with another band that you play with, Kumar. Is that correct? And they have some shows coming up.
Yeah.
And well, we'll talk more about that if we have time. But right now, we need to hear more music because time is flying by really fast. Right? So the next tune we have is in Gaelic. We're going to leave the pronunciation to you on this one.
Oh, we're only that far. Oh my goodness, we got to get more music in here. Yes, it's Bach and Lachen, and that actually is. It's about a bird. It's about the water ouzel, the bird, the dipper. I don't know if we have them in North America, but it's a bird that kind of goes into streams and goes down to the bottom to pick up its food. And it's a strathspey. So this set is very, very Scottish, and it's not only Scottish, but it's also has a big part of its heart is in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia is where my grandfather Mackenzie was from, immigrated from there to Minnesota. So Buck and Lachen is a strathspey. And then we go into Colum Krupach, which is another strathspey, but it's one that's sung. It's pueshtabile, or mouth music. So it's Scots Gaelic, sung to a strathspey rhythm. And Danielle Enblum is dancing behind it. Cotamore Yelisech is another pueshtabile. It's a reel. And Cotamore Yelisech is Elizabeth's great coat. And Elizabeth's big coat is on Anna the fiddler as she's going to be married. That's about all that says. And then we end up with a Scottish reel called the Periwig.
Excellent. All right. Well, this is quite an epic string of tunes. I'm really excited to give it a listen. This is Brass Lassie here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
Callum Cooper Casaglan, come on the curricula. Callum Cooper Casaglan, come the hound the curry. Callum Cooper Casaglan, come on the curricula. Callum Cooper Casaglan, come the hound the curry. Come on the tor in the hall, come on the curricula. Come on the tor in the hall, come the hound the curry. Come on the tor in the hall, come on the curricula. Come on the tor in the hall, come the hound the curry. Callum Cooper Casaglan, come on the curry. Come get the how Cooper come, he listen to the hound. Callum Cooper Casaglan, come on the curry. Come get the how Cooper come, he listen to the hound. Come on the tor in the hall, come on the curricula. Come on the tor in the hall, come the hound the curry. Come on the tor in the hall, come on the curricula. Come on the tor in the hall, come the hound the curry. Go to more yellow set to Ananina Neil, let her go to more yellow set to Anatella Fawcett. Go to more yellow set to Ananina Neil, let her go to more yellow set to Anatella Fawcett. Ananina, Ananina, Ananina Neil, let her Anatella Fawcett. Ananina, Ananina, Ananina Neil, let her Anatella Fawcett. Go to more yellow set to Ananina Neil, let her go to more yellow set to Anatella Fawcett. Go to more yellow set to Ananina Neil, let her go to more yellow set to Anatella Fawcett. Ananina, Ananina, Ananina Neil, let her Anatella Fawcett. Ananina, Ananina, Ananina Neil, let her Anatella Fawcett.
All right. Brass Lassie here on the back catalog listening party with a medley of tunes. And I loved that. I think it was if I don't know if I counted them right, but I think it was the second tune or the mouth music there had both spotlighted Laura and Patrice, who are joining us today on the show.
Love when that piano came in. That was really
so
cool.
Great. And Laura, impressive vocals, because I could not, my mouth does not work that fast. I don't think I could ever do that. Gaelic aside, even if it was in English, I could not have sung that.
Thank you.
So very impressive. And one thing I was thinking about as I was listening to this is you mentioned obviously this is traditional Celtic music, but with added instrumentation with the horns, and obviously you can hear that. But one thing I was thinking about is, well, what instruments would normally be doing the other parts, right? And normally you'd probably have some guitar, which does a lot of the rhythm kind of bass stuff. Sometimes you might have a tenor banjo. What other instruments were you, when you thought of having the horns, were you thinking of it just as an addition, or did you think, oh yeah, this can take the line of this other instrument?
Well, the horns really are an addition, and fiddle. Of course, fiddle is what everyone thinks. So first, probably, and then you wouldn't think of flute, maybe second. But the other thing would have been accordion. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, I would love to have an accordion player in this ensemble, but I haven't quite found someone who anyway, I'm working on it.
Accordion players in the Twin Cities, contact Laura if you're interested.
Yeah. Anyway, but it's plenty. Working with Mary Venorni on fiddle is an extraordinary experience. She is really strong stuff, and she really delivers. She's a wonderful performer. She's great on stage, and just a perfect player. So we really don't need any more, but one can't help but think and dream.
Well, this is a good, interesting question, Ellen, because I was going to ask you, Patrice, a little bit about how you approach the piano stuff. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes I hear just like really simple things that seem to be jumping into rhythm parts and maybe like some of those guitar parts that you might normally hear. How do you approach your piano parts to these tunes? Are you thinking of a particular instrument?
It just depends on the tune and things that I want to punch out on them. And I almost think of the brass section as just a enhancement of in a lot of times in what I'm playing, although sometimes their part gets written out and then I play what they play. So it's kind of back and forth. But yeah, it's really, really a rhythm instrument, and just find any little pieces of things you can do or give them different character. I always say part of I think attention deficit probably helps people to play this way, because you don't want to do the same thing more than once, and so you have to come up with something different.
Yeah.
But it's great to play with these guys because they are so tight with their rhythm. If you play with a bad band, you're stuck kind of playing umcha 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 because you gotta keep the train going.
Yeah.
But a band like this, you can do whatever you want, and they're gonna plow through.
I was going to say the rhythmic sensibility of all of these players, not just Mark Anderson, is pretty incredible, because it has to be to be able to be in sync in the way that you guys are. So yeah, it's really incredible.
Exciting.
Thank you.
The time is waning here on the Back
Where did this
Catalog
hour
Listening
go?
Party. I don't know. And yes, Laura, you have your hand raised.
I do. Before we run out of time, I just want to mention something that just came through today. When we first talked about this, we had this show at the Parkway this month that we were going to talk about. Well, just today, I'm pretty sure I nailed down a date for Brass Lassie at the Parkway Theater in South Minneapolis, May 9th.
Oh, all right.
Not totally confirmed, but 90%. confirmed.
Awesome. And the only way to know is if you're on Laura's email list, she'll let you know. You'll get a little reminder in your inbox about that show and any other projects she's involved in. I mentioned the band Kumar. They're playing January 27th and 28th at the Southern Theater, and that's a mixture of African and Celtic music. Am I right about that?
Right.
So you can hear a totally different kind of music there as well. So
Very
you can
cool.
get all the updates there. And we are going to squeeze in one more tune before we go today. And this is one I know you wanted to make sure we got to today, because it gives a different flavor of what you do, because it's not a Celtic tune. You want to talk about this tune?
This is a tune that we learned from the band Salsa Celtica, which is obviously a band that mixes Celtic, Scottish music mainly, actually, and salsa music, and the members are from Scotland and Venezuela and Cuba, and we love this piece that they do, and we asked them for their permission, and they loved the fact that we wanted to rearrange it for Brass Lassie. So it'd be fun to hear it on the program now.
Wonderful. Let's give it a listen, close out the show. This is Brass Lassie here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
Thank you.
Cuando me vaya será cantando, cuando me vaya será gozando, cuando me vaya será cantando, cuando me vaya será gozando, cuando me vaya. Cuando me vaya será cantando, cuando me vaya
Oh,
vaya será cantando, cuando me vaya. Cuando me vaya será gozando, cuando me vaya. Cuando me vaya será cantando, cuando me vaya. Cuando me vaya será gozando, cuando me vaya. Cuando me vaya será cantando, cuando me vaya. Cuando me vaya será gozando, cuando me vaya. Cuando me vaya será cantando, cuando me vaya. Cuando me vaya será gozando, cuando me vaya.
all right. I think now the
Yeah.
track is finished. Brass Lassie. It was a little psych out ending there, and
Yeah.
beautiful stuff from Gaelic to Spanish here, and lovely stuff here from Brass Lassie today. Big
That got
thanks to
everybody moving. I noticed
yeah,
a lot of really good grooves going on there, head bob wise. Laura and
exactly.
Patrice, nicely done.
Exactly. Laura and Patrice, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to all of you for joining as part of the Back Catalog Listening Party for your comments and questions. If you want to know more about Brass Lassie, you can go to brasslassie.com, order their CD, get the high-res digital files, however you can do it so you can really enjoy this album because it's fantastic. Get on Laura's email list so you can know when Brass Lassie are performing and as well as all of Laura's other performances. So thank you to Laura and Patrice, and
Yeah,
thanks to all
thank
of
you.
you. And
Thank
big
you.
thanks
Thank
to
you.
all the people who support the show through the Patreon every week. And these are the folks that have kept the show going for 147
3,
episodes.
I think.
Oh, 143 episodes, but it will be 147 thanks to these folks: Penny, Anna, Linda, Bevan, Connie, Vaughn, Alan, Chris, Alex, Becky, Galen, Peggy, Joe, Jim, Beverly, and John, Fred, Tim, Sarah, David, Jocelyn, Court, Matt, Steve, Mark, Homestead, Pick and Parlor, Severin, Lynn, Jake, Mary, Many Tracks, Nikki, Joni, and David, our newest supporter. Thank you. And if you want to get involved by supporting the show and get invited to special after parties, Zoom concerts, you can go to the link scrolling across the screen. But mainly, thank you for being here today. And if you like the show, like it on YouTube and direct more bots to Laura McKenzie, Patrice, Brass Lassie, and that will be a good thing. What a great way to kick off a hard
Yeah.
week.
I'm ready
End
for
of
one
the
more
week.
round of shoveling now. I'm gonna
Yeah.
do it with a little bit of more swagger.
That's right. Are you going to do it to a reel or a jig, Tony?
I don't know.
Jiggity,
Maybe a
jiggity,
little bit of
jiggity,
both.
jig. Yeah.
Yeah, diggity dig.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you back next week for another edition of the Back Catalog Listening Party.
All right.
Sláinte.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks
Cheers.
again to
Cheers.
Laura and Patrice.
Cheers.